Good evening, traveler of thoughts and seeker of rest. I'm glad you've joined me here in this quiet space where time softens and the mind can finally exhale. Let the noise of the day fall away, like snow settling on an untouched field. My name is Duncan. I was born in the year 1592, and for reasons that still remain a mystery even to me, I have not aged like other men. The centuries pass, the world turns, and yet I remain, wandering, watching, remembering. More than 400 years have passed since I first opened my eyes to this world, and over that time, I've gathered more stories than I could ever tell in one lifetime. But tonight, I will share one with you. One that lives in a quiet attic, behind a velvet curtain and inside a mirror that does not show you as you are, but only as you once were. Now tell me, what would you do if you gazed into a mirror, and instead of your present reflection, you saw only your childhood face? What if it showed you not the room around you, but the scent of a birthday cake long gone, the feeling of summer wind on a forgotten day, or the glance of someone who loved you and whom time has taken far away? Take a moment. Let that question rest beside you like a folded blanket. And before we begin, if you find comfort in these gentle journeys through time, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and gently tap the bell so that the next story can find you when you most need rest. And I'd be honored if you'd leave me a comment below. Tell me what story you'd like to hear next. And if you would, let me know when you usually go to sleep and in which part of the world you close your eyes. Now, if you're ready, turn off the lights. Lie back. Let your hands rest softly beside you. Release your shoulders, your jaw, your thoughts, and I'll tell you the story of the mirror that only reflected the past. I found it on a cold spring evening in Amsterdam, the kind of evening where fog hangs low between the chimneys, and every sound feels softened by mist. I'd taken refuge in an old merchant's house, long abandoned, its wooden beams sighing beneath the weight of forgotten years. I remember the slow creak of the stairs as I climbed into the attic, led only by candlelight and curiosity. There was little up there, some crates, a moth-eaten coat, the scent of beeswax and age. But in the far corner, something stood beneath a heavy velvet covering, tall, motionless. Quiet in that way some objects are when they are not entirely asleep. When I pulled the cloth aside, I expected to see my reflection, older, unchanged, the familiar face of someone who had stopped aging centuries ago. But the man in the glass was not the one I had become. He was the boy I had once been, barefoot, with hay tangled in his sleeves and the innocence of someone who didn't yet know the weight of time. I stepped back, then forward again. I turned my head. The boy did not. The mirror did not reflect me. It reflected me before. I cannot tell you how long I stood there, heart slowed, thoughts unraveling into silence. The candle beside me burned low, and yet I could not look away. There was something in that moment that felt more intimate than thought, more personal than breath, a stillness that belonged to memory itself. Take a moment to absorb this. What is a mirror, if not a tool for self-recognition? But what if it showed you not who you are now, but only the moments that time has painted over? In the days that followed, I returned often. Each time, the mirror chose something different. Not randomly, I think, but deliberately. A page from the book of my life, held up without explanation. Once, it showed me dining by firelight in Padua, the year 1627, when I had just begun to understand the strange gift, or curse, of never aging. Another time, it showed a moment so small I'd nearly forgotten it. The way a dog I once owned in Paris would tilt her head before falling asleep. Not grand, not dramatic, just real, unshaped by memory, honest. And it made me wonder, what is time truly? Is it a river that sweeps us along, always forward? Or is it more like sediment, layering memory upon memory until the present is just the surface of something far deeper. We speak of the past as if it were gone. But what if it isn't? What if it's only out of sight, still living, still echoing, only waiting for the right mirror to reveal it? The mirror never spoke. It made no sound. But it invited contemplation, like a book without words. And slowly, I came to realize something else. The mirror didn't show what I wanted to see. It showed what I needed to remember. That is perhaps the greatest difference. It did not flatter. It did not accuse. It simply revealed. What would such a mirror show you, I wonder? Would it offer a long-forgotten birthday, the smell of a parent's coat, the echo of laughter at a time when the world was simpler? Or would it remind you of something left unfinished, a part of yourself still waiting to be seen? Sleep on that question, if you will. Let it curl up beside your dreams. Because the night I found that mirror was only the beginning. What happened when others looked into it was something else entirely. And that is where the mystery began to unfold. There is a quiet kind of courage in looking at your own past, but it is quite another thing to witness yourself through someone else's memory. That's when things begin to shift. Not sharply, not abruptly, but like mist rearranging itself in the morning sun. Suddenly, you're not so sure what is real and what is only your retelling of it. It had been several weeks since I first discovered the mirror. I never tried to move it. It seemed rooted to that attic in Amsterdam, as if the wood beneath it remembered the weight of all it had shown. I visited often. Not every night, but when the sky turned a certain shade of grey lavender and the world felt slow enough to let the past whisper through. One evening, I was joined by an old friend, someone I had not seen in nearly a decade. His name was Matthias, a composer, quiet man with a mind like a cathedral, vaulted, echoing, full of unseen design. He was staying in the city for only a few nights, and we'd shared dinner, wine, silence, the way old friends do. When I mentioned the mirror in the attic, he raised an eyebrow. Then, without a word, he followed me upstairs. I stepped back to let him stand before it. He looked into the glass and for a moment said nothing. Then he furrowed his brow. I expected to hear him describe an image of himself as a child, perhaps at the piano or walking beside his mother through an orchard in spring. But when he finally spoke, he said something that made the candlelight feel suddenly colder. "You were there." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "I see you," he said. "Not now, not here. Years ago. We're in Venice, aren't we? You're standing by the canal. You're laughing at something I've just said." And in that instant, I remembered it too. A morning in Venice. The scent of wet stone and roasting chestnuts. Matthias had made a joke about Vivaldi's hair, and I had laughed, freely, without weight, as only the young can. But I hadn't recalled that moment in years. And yet, the mirror had brought it forward, not to me, but to him. Take a moment. Let that rest in your chest, like a ripple on water. What does it mean for a memory to belong not just to you, but to someone else? Where does your experience end and theirs begin? In the days that followed, I invited a few others to look into the mirror, and slowly, a pattern emerged. No one saw the same thing, but what they saw often involved me, or someone we had both known, or a moment we had shared, but remembered differently. A woman once looked into the mirror and saw her sister braiding her hair, but in her telling, she said I was there too, just in the corner, sketching with a bit of charcoal as I used to do, quietly, when I stayed at her family's estate. I hadn't thought of those summers in decades. Another time, a bookseller from Antwerp saw not himself, but a soldier he had once befriended in his youth. The soldier had died long ago, but in the mirror, he was alive, smiling, lifting a glass. The bookseller wept, not from grief, but from the overwhelming fullness of memory made visible. It became clear that the mirror was not merely a device for nostalgia. It did not obey personal timelines. It reflected moments not in isolation, but in relationship, memories that connected us. Philosophers often write of memory as something held within a single mind, but perhaps that has never been true. What if memory is a lattice, a web, and each of us holds a different thread? You may remember a moment as joyful, but someone else in that same moment may remember sorrow. The same place, the same hour, two hearts, two meanings. And the mirror does not resolve the contradiction. It simply allows both to exist. It made me think of something an old scholar once said to me in Vienna when I asked whether he believed in ghosts. He said, "Ghosts are not the dead. They are the living echoes of what we meant to each other." And perhaps that is what the mirror truly showed. Not faces, not years, but echoes of meaning, still resonant, still unfinished. There was something gently humbling in it, to see yourself not as the center of your own past, but as someone else's side character. To realize that in someone's story, you are not the hero, but a background smile, a laugh in a crowd, a line in a diary. And yet, what grace in that? What comfort to know that we live not only in our own memory, but in the lives of others, often in ways we never intended. I stopped bringing people to the mirror after a while, not because it became dangerous, no, never that, but because I began to feel the weight of those reflections. Too many lives, too many versions of truth, all woven into one glass rectangle, humming with time. Still, I would sometimes wonder, quietly, inwardly, whether someone, somewhere, might be seeing me in their mirror, remembering something I had long forgotten, smiling at a version of me that no longer existed. And if that's not a kind of immortality, I don't know what is. In time, though, a question began to form in the back of my mind. A question I did not want to ask, but couldn't stop thinking. What if the mirror wasn't always right? What if some of the memories it showed weren't real at all? And that, I fear, was when the mirror began to lie. There's a special kind of trust we place in memory. Even though we know it fades, reshapes, even betrays us, we still return to it, as one might return to a favorite book, expecting the words to be the same each time. But what happens when memory itself turns unfamiliar? What happens when a reflection feels wrong? It began with a small detail, one that, at first, I dismissed as misremembering. I had gone up to the attic as I often did, late in the evening when the city's windows had dimmed and even the owls outside seemed to hush their calls. The mirror, as always, stood still in its corner. I approached it with the quiet expectancy of ritual. That night, it showed me a warm room, lamplit, lined with books. There was a table, set with a game of chess, and two people seated. One of them was me, but the other I did not recognize. The man across from me had narrow features and wore an embroidered waistcoat I might have seen in the late 1700s. He moved a pawn, smiled, said something I couldn't hear. And I, my reflected self, laughed, as if we were old friends, as if I had known him forever. But I hadn't. No matter how long I stared, no name rose to meet the face. No memory aligned with that room, that game, that night. At first, I simply assumed that I'd forgotten. 4 centuries leave behind many doors, and some grow moss before you notice they've closed. But then it happened again, and again. Each time, the mirror offered me a memory I could not place, moments I could not have lived. And yet, there I was, living them. A winter market in Leipzig. A letter pressed into my hand by a woman with golden gloves. A child sleeping beside me on a train that could not have existed at the time. The details were vivid, too vivid. Not the wispy half images of dreams, but textured, lit, consistent. I began to doubt myself, not in the way one questions a lost key or a missed appointment, but in a deeper, more elemental way. I began to wonder, had I invented entire years without realizing? Or had the mirror begun to create them, Take a moment with that thought. What would it mean to see a memory that never happened but that feels as if it did? Would you trust yourself enough to reject it? Or would you begin to wonder if perhaps you'd simply forgotten? Psychologists call them false memories, fabrications of the mind that arise when gaps are filled in by suggestion, by emotion, by imagination. They can be as strong, as emotional, as real as the truth, and they don't always come from within. Sometimes they are planted, by others, by stories, or even perhaps by mirrors. And yet, what troubled me most wasn't the inaccuracy. It was how beautiful these false memories were. The invented moments were always soft-edged, wistful, touched with just the right amount of melancholy. The kind of past one wishes they had. Not full of grandeur or triumph, but tenderness, gentle farewells, quiet fires, hands held a little longer than necessary. And that was the cruelest part. They were memories I wanted to believe. Not because they were real, but because they were comforting. I remember once seeing myself dancing slowly on a veranda, a song drifting from a gramophone nearby. The sky was the color of faded lilac. The woman in my arms had no name, but I loved her deeply, instinctively, as if I had known her through lifetimes. When the mirror released the image, I stood in silence for nearly an hour. Not because I was confused, but because I missed her. And I realized then, false or true, the past carries weight only when we choose to carry it. The mirror, I now believe, was not lying to hurt me. It was showing me the stories I might have lived. Alternate versions, unchosen paths. There is a theory in physics, one not accepted by all but curiously poetic nonetheless, that for every decision we make, a different universe is born in which we chose differently. A web of infinite selves, each diverging at some unnoticed fork in time. Perhaps the mirror tapped into those other selves, or perhaps it didn't matter. Perhaps what it showed me wasn't real in the way we define reality, but still true, in the emotional sense. And in the quiet hours that followed, I had to ask myself, if a memory soothes you, if it brings peace, does it need to be real? If the heart responds, is that not enough? I stopped asking the mirror for answers. It had become too much like a storyteller who cannot resist embellishment. And maybe we all are, in time. But I never feared it, because even in its deception, the mirror only ever offered love. Still, I knew I couldn't stay lost in it. There is danger in living too long in memory, real or imagined. The world around you begins to blur, and there are things the mirror cannot show, like what lies ahead. But before I could turn from it entirely, the mirror revealed something I had never expected. Not a place, not a face, but someone I had not seen in many lifetimes. Someone who had long since died. And yet, there he was, smiling at me from within the glass. There are moments in life that do not announce themselves. They do not shout, nor even whisper. They arrive like a change in air pressure, a feeling that something in the room has shifted, though nothing seems to have moved. That's how it felt. The first time the mirror showed me someone who was no longer alive. It was late autumn, the kind of night where leaves scratch lightly at window panes and shadows pool in the corners of old rooms. I had not visited the attic in weeks. Perhaps I'd grown wary, or perhaps I needed to feel rooted in the present again, to remind myself that life is lived forward, not back. But something called me up the stairs that evening. Not loudly, just a tug at the edge of thought, like a string pulling gently through fog. The mirror waited, as it always did, covered, still, silent. I removed the velvet and let the candlelight flicker softly across the glass. What appeared was not what I expected. There was no image of me, no memory of childhood or love, no invented ballroom, no lost moment rekindled. There was only a man, alone, sitting on a bench in the Jardin des Plantes in Paris. A book open in his lap, his coat too thin for the season, a familiar glint in his eye that stopped my breath. His name was Etienne. We'd met in 1703 during my time in Paris when I still believed that teaching philosophy might make men wiser. He was a printer's apprentice then, always ink-stained, always asking questions that wandered off the path. He had died of fever in the spring of 1721. I remember it clearly. There was no confusion here, no trick of memory or uncertainty. And yet, there he was, as real in that mirror as he had ever been in life. Not younger, not older, just whole, present in a moment I had never witnessed. He looked up as if he felt my eyes, and he smiled, not at me, precisely, but at something, at someone, perhaps at the memory of a world where he had once walked under golden leaves. I stared at that reflection, uncertain whether I was watching the past, or something else entirely. Not a memory of mine, not a dream, but a presence. Take a moment. Let this settle beside you like a breath held too long. What if the dead do not vanish? What if they are not elsewhere, not erased, but simply living in some fold of time we cannot touch, except with the soft fingertips of remembrance? The mirror continued to show them after that. Not all the time, not predictably, but sometimes when I came to it unguarded, open, tired in the soul, I would find a face that no longer walked this world. A musician from Amsterdam who once taught me how to tune a viol de gamba. A woman I danced with in Bombay, whose name I remember but have never spoken aloud. A boy who once drew pictures in the dirt beside a campfire and gave me the smoothest stone he could find. Some I had known deeply, others barely at all. And yet the mirror returned them to me, not in drama or grandeur, but in moments so ordinary they glowed with meaning. The philosopher Derrida once wrote of hauntology, a concept not of ghosts in the traditional sense, but of presence that remains after absence. Not spirits, but traces. A voice that echoes even after it's no longer heard. A scent that lingers in an empty coat. A smile remembered so often that it seems to return just for a moment when the room is quiet. That, I believe, is what the mirror revealed. The ghosts in the glass were not supernatural. They were not reaching out from some beyond. They were the way we carry the dead with us, not as grief, but as shape. We are molded by those who touched our lives, even if their time with us was short. Their words, their gestures, their silences, all still alive in us. And sometimes it takes a mirror like this one to make us realize that the past has not gone. It has only grown quiet. The mirror was not summoning the dead. It was allowing them to be seen as they live on, not in the world, but in us. That understanding settled into me like snowfall. Soft, silent, inevitable. And I began to wonder, if all the people I carry live still within me, then what truly is my reflection? Am I one man, or a mosaic of every life that ever touched mine? And when I'm gone, whose mirror will I appear in? Will someone see me on a quiet evening, in a flicker of glass and shadow? Will they remember my voice, my presence? A story I once told. It is a thought both comforting and humbling, that perhaps we are not simply remembered. Perhaps we continue in glimpses, in gestures, in quiet reflections seen in mirrors that show more than just faces. And in that way, no one is truly lost. Still, the mirror had not yet finished its work, because one night it revealed something different. Not a face, not a place, but a question so quiet it could only be heard in silence. And it asked me, not in words, but in knowing, "Who are you now, Duncan?" There comes a time, if you live long enough, when the question of who you are becomes far less certain than it once seemed. Not because you've forgotten, but because you've become too many people to hold all at once. That winter in Amsterdam, the air grew heavy with snow. Even the bells in the church towers seemed to ring more slowly, their chimes drifting like falling ash. The attic was colder than usual. the wood groaning with every gust of wind, the floorboards sighing as if under the weight of years. I climbed the stairs with no expectation, only habit. Perhaps I thought I had seen all the mirror could show me. Past, shared memory, illusion, even death. But I was wrong. That night, the mirror did not show a scene or a face or a moment. At first, it showed nothing at all. Only the candlelight behind me, flickering across a surface of deep blackness, as though the glass had turned to ink. But I could feel something. A tension, a presence. I stood before it, breathing slowly, and then, just for a breath of time, I saw something stir. Not one image, but three. A boy of perhaps 10, standing barefoot in the grass. My current self, silent and observing. And another version of me, older still, seated at a desk, scribbling words I could not read, his eyes heavy with knowing. And then, they were gone. Not faded, not erased. Just dissolved, like morning frost beneath the sun. I stared at the glass, waiting for something more. But the surface remained blank. No vision followed, no memory returned, only the slow echo of a question I could not quite frame. Who am I? I do not mean my name. I have had many of those. Nor the roles I've played: teacher, sailor, apprentice, friend, lover, ghost. I mean, the self that endures, if such a thing exists at all. Take a moment with that. Let it settle in the space behind your eyes. Are you the child you once were? The person you are today? Or something in between? A thread running through all those forms, but never fully visible in any of them? In some philosophies, the self is a flame. Constant in appearance, but always consuming new material. Never quite the same fire from one moment to the next. In others, it is a river, impossible to step into twice because both the water and the one who steps have changed. And in some traditions, there is no self at all, only experience passing through us like wind through branches. The mirror, I believe, understood this. Or perhaps it was this. Not a thing with knowledge, but a thing made of questions. For years, I had come to it seeking the past. But that night, it offered me something far more intimate. It offered me the space between myselves, not memory, not history, but becoming. A quiet reminder that we are never only who we once were, and never only who we are now. We are always in motion, always unfolding. After that night, I stopped visiting the attic. Not because I feared the mirror, but because I had seen what I needed. Not a face, not a moment, but a silence that asked more than it answered. I left the house in Amsterdam when the snow melted. I never returned, and though I never saw that mirror again, it has never truly left me. Sometimes, when I catch my reflection in a window or the surface of still water, I wonder what it would show me now. Not the past, not the dead, but the shape of all the selves I've ever been, woven quietly into the one who looks back. And maybe, just maybe, that's all a mirror ever does. Reminds us that we are never finished, that even in stillness, we are becoming. So, if you have wandered with me this far, perhaps you'll walk beside me again. I'd be honored if you'd subscribe to this channel and tap the little bell so that the next story may find you when your heart is quiet and your breath is slow. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. What story would you like me to tell next? And when do you usually close your eyes at night? And in what part of the world? You've wandered far enough for one evening. Let the mirror rest. Let the questions drift. You are enough, just as you are. Rest well. Good night.